If Shamans were to have a fourth spec, I think a tanking spec would fit the best. I'd call it the Primal specialization. Since the beginning of the game, Shamans have stepped into 5-mans and some of them have tried to tank, and some with great success, but they've never really been able to live up to the other tanks as time has gone on. They don't have the full kit, even though they can use shields and they've been able to use Rockbiter as a pseudo taunt. They just don't have the full toolkit to tank. Shamans all have access to fire, air, and water totems, which could roughly be aligned with the elemental, enhancement, and restoration specs. Shaman also have access to earth totems, the very nature of which represents something strong and well themed toward a tanking spec. The earth theme is something I believe the spec could be centered around. Shaman already have a cooldown which alters their appearance and abilities for a short time in the form of Ascendance. For a Primal Shaman, I'd love to see the idea of taking on a new form and slightly altering abilities become a core aspect of their gameplay. They could take on the form of a rock elemental humanoid, a mix between the Morchok model and something sleeker like the image on the right. This form would make them feel unstoppable, like they are a true mass of living, moving earth. However, there would need to be a balance between these two forms, so that each was compelling and necessary. Active mitigation would definitely play an important role in this balance. All tanks work on some sort of resource, whether it's holy power, rage, runes and runic power, or chi and energy. A primal shaman would be no different, but unique to this spec would be a resource mechanic that drives the shaman from one form to the next. The idea would be that you build up resource in one form so that you can expend it in the next. You wouldn't be forced to switch from either form, but you would lose the ability to actively mitigate damage in one form once you had expended the resources. So the only way to get it back would be to switch to the alternate form and start building them again. Outside of combat, you would passively generate or lose your resources until you have reached one resource each. The Primal Shaman would use Intellect Male to help tip the scales to a balance between agility and Intellect Male. My idea for a 4th spec Hunter would utilize Intellect Male as well, leaving the spec balance for loot at 4-4. Outside of questing greens, agility shields aren't really a thing, and implementing them would leave only one spec using them, so it's another favorable argument for intellect as the core stat for a primal shaman. Spirit would function just as it does for other hybrid casters, adding it to hit, with all of the primal shaman's abilities functioning as spells. Haste would increase the rate at which you could generate your resources and use your abilities, while crit would increase the amount of resource each ability would generate. Armor would passively be bolstered to be in line with the plate tanks upon choosing the specialization. Greater damage mitigation and threat generation would be applied when applying Rockbiter weapon. It would also reduce the chance to be critically hit for the primal spec. Mastery would contribute both passively and actively to the shaman's mitigation. In the regular form, a shaman would be able to block. However, in the primal form, Mastery would increase the raw damage reduction. Mastery would also improve the active mitigation for both forms. The regular form would actively mitigate damage with an absorb, while the primal form would actively mitigate damage with a physical damage reduction. Self-healing could be done in a similar fashion as Maelstrom Weapon works for enhancement shamans. However, this buff could be used strictly for healing Surge. As for abilities, Ascendance would be unavailable for this spec, as the main premise is already based around switching in and out of an ascended form. Unleashed Elements would be modified specifically into a standard taunt, but only for the primal spec. Earthquake could potentially be moved from the elemental spec to the primal spec, with some modifications to make it an instant cast on a cooldown that applies the Weaken Blows effect and has a proc chance. Active mitigation abilities would be off the global cooldown. Living Rock would be generated in the regular form and expended in the primal form, while Nature's Embrace would be generated in the primal form and expended in the regular form. Ground Slam, Earth Shock, and Aftershock would all generate a fraction of a charge. Fault Line would be used as a filler ability. The primal form would have a roll ability similar to Monk's. rolling stone. The regular form would have a self-rooting mechanism, unshakable. As for talents, Nature's Guardian would need threat reduction removed for the Primal Shamans, and Unleashed Fury would need to be removed altogether to make the spec viable. Perhaps Enduring Elementalist could replace it for those who love pets. So that's my take on a 4th spec for Shamans. What do you think? What would you like to see in a 4th spec for Shamans? Let me know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out my channel for some other videos.